Hello, my name is Deborah Herb. I'm the project coordinator for the Department of Black Studies 50th anniversary here at the University of Nebraska at Omaha. And it is my honor to welcome you to this, our final virtual event in this year-long series celebrating the department's 50th anniversary. We've spent the year educating the general public about the history and experiences of Black Omaha, and we've exhibited the unique African-centered methodological approaches, an immense range of research within Black, African-American, Africana, Pan-African, African, and African diaspora studies. This has highlighted the tremendous growth of the discipline over the past 50 years, and also how a true, grounded Black studies approach distinguishes itself from the mere study of Black people or Black issues. Also, we have taken the time to begin every event by paying homage to the students who demanded, protested, and fought for change at this university. On November 10th, 1969, 54 Black UNO students were arrested for staging a sit-in in the president's office because of his failure to address their concerns regarding racial discrimination and cultural indifference on this campus. The arrest of the Omaha 54, as they became known, galvanized UNO's student population and Omaha's Black community. Omaha's Black civic and social organizations and churches worked together to bail out all 54 students and support them in their demands with the administration. One of their demands was the creation of a Department of Black Studies. And in the fall of 1971, that demand became a reality. But the arrest of the Omaha 54 is significant, not just for the history of the Department of Black Studies, but for the entire university. Their willingness to put themselves and their academic careers on the line by demanding space within which students could engage in the study and analysis of issues concerning African and African descended peoples from an intellectual basis that itself was grounded in the cultural logic of African and African descended peoples, changed the face and the course of this university. The recognition of this demand not only created the academic space for a Black Studies department, which is one of the oldest departments in this country and one of a very few in the Great Plains region, it also opened the door and created the space for Latinos and Latin Americans, Asians and Asian Americans, Native Americans, and women to have their voices heard and to receive the scholarly recognition to which they were also due. We are all the legacy of the 54. The Department of Black Studies salutes you, the Omaha 54, and thanks you, the Omaha Black community, for laying the foundation for this department in this space, 50 years old and 50 years strong. We thank you. Born of struggle and refined in the fires of discrimination and oppression, Black Studies is a discipline that from its very beginning has been called upon to study, analyze, and critique the continuing effects of historical enslavement, colonization, land dispossession, and corporate imperialism. On that basis, we must stop to acknowledge that this university and the very city itself sits upon the sacred tribal lands of the Native American people for whom this city is named, the Omaha, and that of other First Nation people who regarded this land as their communal homeland. We stand in solidarity with you. Finally, we have continued to bear witness to the ongoing struggle of African people around the world, starting with the people of Haiti, devastated by yet another earthquake, the protests of students at Howard University because of inadequate living conditions, coups in Sudan and Burkina Faso, war in Ethiopia, African, Indian, and Asian students being discriminated against as they tried to flee the invasion and war in Ukraine, and the battles in this country against efforts to restrict voting rights and deny the historical truths of enslavement and its legacy of systemic racial discrimination. We've also borne witness to the effort to do justice and hold accountable those proximate actors who took the life of Burkina Faso's and Africa's shining light, Thomas Sankara, 35 years ago. And we saw the first African-American woman confirmed to the US Supreme Court, despite false claims and ugly, unsuccessful smear tactics. Yet this year has proven that Black studies is still as vital and as necessary as it was at its very beginning. And that is why we are here today. This evening, we will take part in a discussion that looks at the challenges that Black studies departments have faced and strategies that can be developed for moving forward. To lead us in this discussion, we have one current chair, 3 former chairs, and 1 curriculum developer, all faculty members in various iterations of Black studies departments. First, we have Dr. Cynthia Robinson. Dr. Robinson is the chair of the Department of Black Studies at UNO, a position she has held since 2015. She is an associate professor in the Department of Communications. Double majoring as an undergraduate, Dr. Robinson earned a Bachelor of Science degree in Black Studies and Broadcasting from UNO, followed by a Master of Science in Urban Studies, also from UNO, and a PhD in Communication Studies from the University of Nebraska at Lincoln. Her research combines the disciplines of Black Studies and Communications as she examines issues of race, interpersonal communication, cultural identity, cultural dominance, and Black male-female relationships. Next, we have Dr. Mario Beatty. Dr. Beatty is an associate professor of Afro-American Studies at Howard University in Washington, D.C. He earned a BA degree in Black World Studies from Miami University in Oxford, Ohio, an MA degree in Black Studies from Ohio State University, and a PhD in African American Studies from Temple University. While at Temple, he served as an educational consultant for the School District of Philadelphia, where he helped to write curriculum and to train teachers in what was then the newly required course in African American history, which was mandatory for the entire Philadelphia school district. Since then, Dr. Beatty has taught at Morris Brown College in Atlanta, where he first served as chair, Bowie State University in Bowie, Maryland, and Chicago State University, where he also served as chair of the Department of African American Studies. In addition to his teaching responsibilities at Howard, he also currently serves as the president of the Association for the Study of Classical African Civilizations. Next, we have Dr. Lynn Johnson. Dr. Johnson is an associate professor of Africana Studies at Dickinson College in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, where she co-founded the department and served as its chair. She earned a BA in English from Salisbury University in Maryland, her PhD in English language and literature with a focus on 19th through 20th century American and African American literatures from Temple University, and that's kind of out of order. I did not reorder that properly. Her MA from Temple in African American Studies. Her primary research interests are in African American literary production and theory, as well as African American food cultures. Dr. Johnson has published articles in the Journal of Pan-African Studies and Southern Literary Journal, and most recently chapters in collected volumes, including Journeys of the Slave Narrative in the Early Americas and Food on Film, Bringing Something New to the Table. Currently, she's completing a manuscript entitled Claiming Sovereignty of the Black Self, Psychodietetic Narrative Remediations of Food Insecurity in African American Fiction, which analyzes and contests hermeneutics of the Black body that correlate African Americans' dietary uncertainty with pathological conceptions of Black embodiment and agency in literature. Dr. Catherine Adams. Dr. Adams is an associate professor of African and African American Studies at Claflin University in Orangeburg, South Carolina. Dr. Adams earned a bachelor's degree in English from Johnson C. Smith University, a master's in African American Studies from Temple University, and a PhD in African American Studies from the University of Massachusetts Amherst. Her research interests include Africana literary history, Africana-based pedagogy and curriculum development, Africana speculative fiction, digital humanities, and freedom and marronage narratives. Her work has appeared in the Killens Review of Arts and Letters, the Compass, and the Newberry Library Web exhibit. In 2020, her work with undergraduate students as co-researchers appeared in Rediscovering Frank Yerby. Last year, her work titled Redefining High Stories, Conducting and Preserving Oral Histories in Africana Studies was published in Diversity Matters, The Color, Shape, and Tone of 21st Century Diversity, edited by Emily A. Williams. And finally, we have Dr. Andre Brooks Key. Dr. Key is an associate professor of African and African American Studies at Claflin University, where he has served as program coordinator for 5 years. He holds a BA in history from Central State University, a MA in history from Chicago State University, and a PhD in African American Studies from Temple University. His areas of teaching and research interests include 20th century African American religious history, Black male studies, and curriculum design in African American studies. He has published in the Journal of Africana Religion, Black Theology, and International Journal, and is a contributing writer to Religion Dispatches. So I want to say thank you and welcome to all of our illustrious panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right.
And
So-
can I say something real quick before you begin?
Yes.
I want to say thank you to Deborah Herb, who has been is our 50th coordinator for this celebration all year, who has done the job of at least 3 people, who has illustrated academic excellence, what Black Studies is, what Black Studies could be, bringing all kinds of different people together. You have put the Department of Black Studies in Omaha, Nebraska on a national and international level, and I thank you for that. I thank you for all of your tireless hard work, hours and hours and hours spent. We never know what you're going to say when you do the introduction, and it's always inclusive. I just absolutely respect what you have done, and I just want to say thank you, thank you, thank you. And there's no amount of money, whatever we pay you, we don't pay you what you're worth. Thank you. I just want to say that. Okay, go ahead.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Robinson. All right. So my first question to you. So in putting this panel together, we have people who have, and I intentionally wanted to try to get a mix for this, but we started out with at least one person who was able to create a department, and then others who inherited departments. So each of these presents unique challenges. But I wanted to start off with Dr. Johnson, because she was able to come in and actually create a department from scratch. So I wanted to know what that whole process looked like, because I think if everybody had their choice, they would like to create one from scratch because you have your own ideas, but that even entails its own set of challenges. So can you talk to us about that? And then some of you others can pick up about what it's like, the experience of inheriting a department.
Well, thank you so much, Deb, for the invitation to be here. And I really congratulate the Department of Black Studies here at the University of Nebraska, Omaha. When I came to Dickinson is a small liberal arts college in Carla, Pennsylvania, outside of Harrisburg. In 2004, I was hired, first of all, granted a dissertation fellowship, and then offered a tenure track job simultaneously. So I was coming out of an English department PhD program and really just kind of new to this small liberal arts college, the culture of a small liberal arts college, and also where do I fit into this scheme of things. And so I had gotten another job offer, and the dean said, can I talk to you about, getting you to stay here? And I said to him, I will never stay at a place that doesn't have a Black Studies department. And so he said, well, let's make it happen. So after conversations with colleagues that were recently hired, who had some background in Africana studies, we decided to, over the next couple of years, do our research about the institution of Dickinson. Had there been any calls for Black studies at Dickinson at all? And so our first point of contact was our archivist. So we went into the Dickinson archives to research what was happening in the 1950s, 1960s at Dickinson, and where Black students, where their interests were in the type of coursework that we would be able to offer contemporarily. So we found a lot of calls for Black Studies department, and students would actually be TAs in classes like history to teach about racial issues. So the professors weren't teaching, the students were teaching each other. We also found evidence of, correspondence between deans. Some of them not, supporting a Black Studies department. Some of them were saying, well, we need to because the students are starting to ask about them. We also found that the Congress of African Students, they were very active on campus in the 1960s. They were constantly demanding Black Studies courses and even an endowed chair in Black Studies. So we used that history as a jumping off point to say, what were they calling for then? And then asking our students at that moment, what are you asking for now? So really, we weren't putting ourselves first in the scheme of creating this department. We were thinking about, again, what students were demanding historically and contemporarily. So from there, myself and two other colleagues, we began to research liberal arts colleges, what was happening on their campuses with Black Studies. And we found that most of them had a program, but not a defined, department with a major. They often had certificate programs. So we know we didn't want that iteration. We wanted a departmental status. So we were figuring like, how do we make this, demand clear that we want to go beyond certificates? So we started to think about what would make our program unique. And in that way, we started looking at the strengths of each of the faculty members who were already hired at Dickinson who could help constitute the foundation. So I was already there teaching African-American literature. I was the only one who was trained in Africana Studies and African-American Studies from Temple. So we had to formulate really a study group to see where everybody's disciplinary interests lied, right? And then how do we then get people up to speed about the discipline of Africana Studies and not just simply taking from traditional, quote unquote, traditional departments and their disciplinary outlooks and just, say I'm teaching about Black folks, so therefore I should be teaching in Black Studies. We're very, very, very weary of that positionality. So we started these study groups. I was introducing them to works that I had learned about or read about in Black Studies at Temple. And we started to really hash out what a curriculum would look like. After that, we consulted with Dr. James Stewart, who was at the time the president of the National Council of Black Studies. So he vetted our proposal, which resonated with the model curriculum that the council had already established. So we were not just pulling the curriculum out of thin air. We were saying, well, what is this approved model? So this is what we really built our program around, the types of classes that we have, the core courses. First of all, what would an intro to Africana Studies look like? If we're going to teach this, are we going to create a standardized syllabus? Or are we going to say, let's make sure we all teach the concepts, the ideas of Africana Studies, and then you choose the text within the discipline to communicate those ideas so that wouldn't be so rigid where you must teach everything that I say you have to teach, or, so it wouldn't be so rigid. We also thought about our theory of methods class because we knew that we wanted our students to have a capstone experience that would involve a thesis. So how do we prep them to write a thesis early on, and then making sure that those methods were reinforced throughout our intermediate and upper level topics classes. So we were very deliberate in every single core course. So we settled on 3: intro, approaches to Africana Studies, which is a theory and methods class, and then the capstone writing a senior thesis in Africana Studies. So we were really, adamant about these 3 core courses that would take the students to the major and really start to position them as emerging scholars, because we also thought about the ways in which we were going to market the program. It wasn't simply about touting us as professors of Africana Studies and, we know our stuff in this way, but also how the students then can see themselves in Africana Studies. So really taking our egos out of it and saying we are going to develop this community of scholars who are very much, committed to the discipline of Black Studies. So after we had, generated this proposal, had it vetted by Dr. Stewart, also consulting our colleagues at Gettysburg and Franklin and Marshall, because we're part of a consortium, and that we also sponsor an Africana Studies conference every year. We started to then think about how this would benefit the community members. So we started to bring in community voices, community partners to say, well, how can we support your adult education programs? Or how can we support your student after school programs? So we were able to identify community partners early on as well. So we put all of this in our proposal. We also did our own institutional research in terms of how many courses in Africana Studies or relate to Africana Studies have been taught in the last 5 years before we submit this proposal. So we started to see what the enrollments in those classes were. So to see, are they really interested in Africana Studies? The students that aren't, coming to us directly and saying, we want Africana Studies, we wanted to see what the enrollments were. So to put that as a part of our proposal, this is the interest as well. So we really did our homework on an institutional level, on a national level, on a liberal arts level, looking at our peer institutions, what they were doing, what did we want to say about ourselves that would be unique, what opportunities would we provide our students. And we also knew that it had to include experiential learning as part of the curriculum, that no student could go through an Africana Studies program that we were creating without cultural immersion. When we were thinking about this, we were not thinking about internships where they would go and answer phones and do that kind of legwork. It had to directly impact the Black community in a positive way. It wasn't to go in and collect information from the Black community, it was to give back to the community, but also offering programming that would bring the Black community onto our campus as well. Because there's always that divide between what the college wants you to get done and what the community, says, I don't want to do that, but you're just using us. So we wanted to make sure we're not just going into the community for the sake of gathering information and that's it. So we were very adamant about making sure that our students and we as professors were very visible in the community. And we still uphold those connections today because, again, this is so important to the discipline of Africana Studies as well. So in thinking of all of this, putting it all together, we did have some pushback from disciplines on campus because they thought that we would threaten their enrollments. We are teaching courses about Black subject matter, quote unquote. Why do we need an Africana Studies program? So when we pulled up the statistics of the last time they taught any of that content, it became clear why it was necessary to have a Black Studies program on this campus and the ways in which we would teach it systematically and consistently. And so this is, the ways in which we handled a lot of that, but also making relationships among other campus constituencies and other programs as well. So not everybody was against us. We knew we had to have allies in this, considering that all of us in this study group were junior untenured faculty members. So we had to come together, right? Not only amongst ourselves, but also getting support from senior scholars across campus. And those relationships were very important, and they still are, because we cannot operate in isolation. We need to have those relationships firmly established, for the good of the department and also for our students who are mostly double majors. So we wanted to make sure that happened. So our proposal was approved in 2008. And I became the chair shortly afterwards. After a semester, a senior colleague said, I don't want to do the chair anymore. We need somebody to pick this up. So I became chair untenured of Africana Studies, one of the co-founders. And I served as chair for 10 years. The only times I have not been chair of Africana Studies at Dickinson is when I've been on sabbatical. So there has been challenges, but overall we have built a really strong department that looks at the students, not just as students, but also, as I said, emerging scholars. And we provide a lot of, opportunities for them to invest in the department because they are the machine, really, right, behind us. Like they want to learn, they are the recruiters, right, more than we as professors are. So it was important for us to make sure our students have a voice. So therefore, we also created a student advisory board for Africana Studies. So our majors and minors sometimes come to our department meetings. They also put together events as well. So we're not, the end all be all to the department. So we wanted to be inclusive, particularly with our students. So in a nutshell, that's how we develop our curriculum. That is how we try to get the investment in the department, and how the community also played a big part and still plays a big part in that.
you raised a lot of issues with what you just said that we will circle back to, but the issue of the study group, you know, the faculty coming together, that's one that we need to come back to and address. The community engagement, you know, going out and making those connections in the community, that community piece, and then also coming back to student engagement. So those are three things that we're going to come back to after we let some other people talk about the challenges of coming into an inherited department and what that looks like.
I was trying to let the guest speak before I go on. Okay, all right. Well, yes, quite interesting. My situation is I came to UNO in 1991 to major in Black studies specifically. And I am a native Omahaan, you know, lived in Nebraska my entire life, know about the University of Nebraska at Omaha, but I had never heard of the Omaha 54. I didn't even know there was a Department of Black Studies at UNO until someone told me you could go up to UNO and major in all of the stuff you're interested in, which has a name, Cynthia. It's called Black Studies. So I come to Black Studies and I fall in love with one of the first courses I ever took was called Ancient African Civilization, taught by the chair, Dr. George Garrison, and it just blew my mind. It blew my mind. So I clearly, this is what I want to do. I definitely want to major in Black Studies. I had pushback from everybody. Everybody said, don't major in Black Studies. Why would you major in Black Studies? Whatever you do, don't major in Black Studies. And I said, I'm going to major in Black Studies. I don't care what you say. So I was determined to do that, did all of that. And actually, as a student, there's a high turnover of faculty in Black Studies at UNO. There has been for most of our existence. And the current chair then, he left, Dr. George Garrison, he left. And I then got, as a student, asked to be on the search committee and then so that's how we brought Dr. James Conyers. And so then I taught my first course in Black Studies under Dr. James Conyers. And then some other stuff went down. And so now I'm not in Black Studies and I'm in communication. So I'm in communication and then Conyers leaves and then comes another chair. So I'm, kind of just right down the hall. So I see things. Then I'm on two search committees as a faculty person, kind of courtesy faculty for a couple of other chairs. And one of the chairs is Dr. Nikita Imani, who is still faculty in Black Studies. What I realized is that the university was doing all of these national searches, bringing in all of these chairs, and then really not supporting the chairs. So I realized that the university was setting the department up for failure. That is what I saw. Now, I was in the School of Communication and I am a Goodrich Scholarship student and I was a grad assistant in Goodrich. And those are two excellent award-winning departments. So I come to Black Studies and I bring that with me. And I saw immediately, one of the first things I saw was, oh, they do things to Black Studies that they wouldn't dare do to other departments. So there's that. I saw the infighting, but what I didn't understand was the top-down racism. So once I figured all that out, I decided that I was going to use all of my power to make this department what it could be and respected, because the discipline of Black Studies is that important. And I wanted people to know that the students want Black Studies. I always say the students want it, it's the grown-ups that's the problem. So that has been our struggle. One of the first things I saw is the curriculum overhaul. We needed to do a massive curriculum overhaul. Somebody want to teach this course? Oh, there's no master syllabus, the people, such a high turnover. So the faculty that created the course, they're not there anymore. And by the way, they're not speaking to anybody. You can't find them. It's just absolutely crazy. So again, coming from the School of Communication, and being a full-time faculty in the School of Communication. And before that, being a grad assistant in the Goodrich Scholarship Program, I said, oh no, we can do this. We can bring this department to standard. And I, being from here, I have allies on this campus. And so I knew just who to go to say, hey, instead of a Bachelor of Arts, we need a Bachelor of Science. And say, hey, we need to do this. And can you cross-list this course? Oh, well, sure, Cynthia, why not? Oh yeah, hey, how you doing? Yeah, girl, how you doing? I ain't seen you in a while. Hey, can we cross-list this? Or talk to such and such. So I knew. And one of the things that my criticisms of how the university handled Black studies is, again, all of these national searches. Because one thing about the Department of Black Studies in Omaha, Nebraska, it has been the community that has supported Black studies. We have a powerful group of adjuncts that hold that department together, baby. And they are from the community. And sometimes when you have people coming in from out of town, they don't understand, they don't know the faculty. And so they kind of, don't understand the importance of it. So I really think whatever successes I've been able to have for the last 7 years, my claim to fame is that I am a native Omahawan, and I've got 30 years at the University of Nebraska at Omaha. So I kind of knew what to do. And a lot of folks let me do what should be done. And some things that I wasn't able to do yet, we're still going to get those things done.
So do we just jump on? Oh, I'll go next. So I inherited the program at Claflin University in Orangeburg, South Carolina. Although the program wasn't in disrepair, it had largely turned into the Black History program because it was mainly run by historians. So when I arrived in the fall of 2016, a lot of overhaul needed to be done in terms of reintroducing courses that were on the books but weren't taught, particularly in the social sciences and the arts and humanities. We had a gen ed course called African American Heritage, which again had turned into basically just a African American history survey course. So really restructuring that course, because nearly every student had to take it, was key to revitalizing interest in the program. Making it interdisciplinary, looking at aspects of culture, like mundane things like foodways, dress in the dorm, and things that really attracted students. Was the bait on my hook to get students interested in understanding that you can earn a living studying Black people. Showing them, the new museum at the Smithsonian, like, look at these people. These are people who have went on to, gain expertise in African American culture, and they can get jobs because at the same time, our school was going through a reorganization focusing on career pathways and career preparedness. So really restructuring African American studies as a career pathway, because many students, as many others have already said, they arrive on campus, they don't really know what Black studies is. I've had to be on the phone and emails with parents who what is my student, what's my child going to learn with Black studies? How are they going to get a job? So, actually having to put in that work of talking to parents who sent their child off to get a degree in business, and they, after a semester, say, I want to major in Black studies, and assuring them that they will, be job ready. One student in particular ended up with an internship at the Library of Congress and discovered an uncatalogued version of the Green Book. And so those types of successes we could build upon. Now, we're not a department, but we are degree granting. We offer a BA and a minor, and we're housed within the humanities program, but we become somewhat the flagship program in our humanities department in the terms of the history and religion programs are also with us, kind of also have a Africana focus. And even our Spanish program, they specialize in Afro-Hispanic literature and studies. So we're almost like a de facto program. A de facto department, even though we carry the name humanities. So in many ways, retooling the program has been our main focus, and going forward with my colleague, Dr. Adams, community engagement is probably the next obstacle we want to tackle, because, with COVID, that kind of shut off the community to us once we started getting certain curriculum aspects together. So now it's taking it out into the community and rebuilding that relationship.
Well, I guess I'll go. Again, I thank you for inviting me to this panel, and just a wonderful job throughout this year in terms of programming, Deborah and Dr. Robinson. I have all of my degrees in Black Studies, and so I've brought that knowledge to whatever space I've been in. And my first job was at Morris Brown College in the Atlanta University Center. And that was a special place. And Morris Brown had lost its accreditation. And it just actually regained its accreditation like just a couple of weeks ago. It was a very special place. I served as chair for a brief time there before it went down. But that was a special place with a lot of intellectual firepower. Not a lot of resources, but the faculty there were African-centered, were fully knowledgeable of the discipline. And there were I have never been in a space where there had been that much collegiality among faculty members working as a team, as a whole, collectively to move students along in a very serious and systematic way. And, we didn't have much money. We tried to create a reader, our own Africana Studies reader. And we used that as our introduction to African American Studies textbook. And so we discussed that. We spent like days and days and weeks discussing what would go in this reader and how to deliver the content in this reader. Every selection was well chosen. And so we used this text, all of our faculty members who taught Intro to African American Studies, we all used this text and taught from this text. So that gave us common grounding, and it also gave us some extra money that we could actually use to program in our department. And I wouldn't have left Morris Brown at all had it not went down. And I went from there to Bowie State University, and I went there on the promise that I was going to create a master's degree program in African American Studies. And I loved actually teaching at Bowie State University, but I just kind of realized that, well, that wasn't going to be in the cards. And so I got an opportunity to go out to Chicago State to be chair of their department. In their department, there was definitely some internal turmoil before I got there. And that actually follows in a lot of spaces, white and Black, quite frankly, and for different reasons. And I would say when I got to Chicago, actually with any institutional formation, is that you have to master the institutional environment when you inherit something, and you have to master the political environment. And that is the board of trustees. You have to know how decisions are being made, how power is being leveraged. You have to make very strategic connections in the community. So one of the first things I did when I was chair was I just surveyed for a year. And after that year survey, I created a master strategic plan. And I introduced that plan to the faculty and then the affiliated faculty. And we use it as a baseline to discuss the department. And the unfortunate thing about being at Chicago State is that you can have on paper, you can have the most powerful curriculum, but if you don't have the people to actually deliver it, it means very little. So when I arrived at Chicago State University, I arrived with myself, with one full-time faculty member, one lecturer full-time, and the rest were adjuncts and affiliate faculty. That's what I had to work with. And when I left, Chicago State University, I was able to add one more faculty member as I was leaving. And that's an inherent challenge in and of itself, because I felt like we were delivering a very strong product given the challenges, but it was very clear. And this is the other thing that I want to say about inheriting something. And then also in the political economic environment that we're in of neoliberalism. And that means that this plays out in terms of assessment, and this plays out in terms of universities trying to retrench the arts and sciences, but especially the liberal arts and humanities and social sciences. Those are the things that get cut. Those are the things that get reduced. So even now, like at African American Studies at Chicago State University, it's in name only. It exists on paper now, but for all intents and purposes, it no longer exists. And that's not a knock on Chicago State, but they are retrenching everything. History, sociology, anthropology, everybody is taking a hit. So you can kind of see this retrenchment going on, nationwide. And so as Black Studies is attempting to fight to maintain these maroon spaces, whether they be programs or departments or interdisciplinary entities, we're also fighting these larger forces that are impacting other programs. And so it's a very, very difficult fight. And so I realized, that there was a cap. There was only so far that I could go at Chicago State, given the severe challenges. And actually, I was told that by the administration, quite frankly, which is a whole nother story. I won't get into all of the back and forth, but I was literally told by the administration, by Elnor Daniels, when I came, that they weren't really going to support the department. It was absurd. But let me know, okay, where am I? And that let me know that I had to politically navigate in a very strong way to maintain that space. And it took leverage both inside and all of the leverage that I could muster outside of Chicago State University to keep them at bay. So it's a very, very delicate balance. And at the same time, Chicago State University, while I was there, we were still the most successful undergraduate program in the state of Illinois in terms of majors. But that never meant anything to the administration. And so they were constantly comparing us in terms of this quote unquote assessment data. They were constantly comparing us to other programs in arts and sciences. And they were constantly attempting to try to use that to basically place us into this larger basket of other programs. That was their goal. We want y'all with history, sociology, anthropology, geography. We want you in this entity. We don't want you autonomous by yourself. And that happened after I left, and now that's where it's at. And now there's no faculty members there to even teach the content. That's why I'm saying it's on paper now, but it no longer exists. But, I became associate chair coming to Howard. I don't think I'll ever be chair again, by the way. Okay, but I became associate chair at Howard. And Howard has its own set of challenges, but it also has a tremendous amount of possibilities. And, the history of Howard, people should know it. People should know Howard University at its inception, just like they know San Francisco State University. And I think it's unfortunate that the history of its beginnings is not well known and not well written about in historical annals, but it has played a very large role, a very prominent role. And to this day, it continues to play that role, despite the challenges against very conservative administrations, even to this day. So the faculty, the staff, and students have always been much more progressive than Howard's administrations. And that tension has always been there from the very beginning of this institution, and that tension continues to play out even today. You know, people ask me all the time, like, we sit as a department with Greg Carr, with Valethia Watkins, with myself, with Josh Myers, you know, these very prominent scholars. And people ask me all the time, well, why doesn't Howard have a graduate degree program in African American studies? Well, ask Howard University. You know, it's not for the lack of trying, meaning that we are really right now, in terms of the department that we've kind of inherited now, where I'm at now, we're doing beautiful things at Howard University. I mean, our majors, the numbers of our majors are strong every year. We have high profiles outside of the university. We're touching everyone. We're bringing this knowledge, Africana studies knowledge, to and through our communities always. And that's very important for us, because we've never seen universities as sites for our liberation. And I certainly have never seen that as a site of our liberation. They're sites for education, you know. But for me, you know, it's very important to maintain those links to the community. And we have been able to do that to a very significant extent. And it takes a lot in order to do that when you inherit things. And at Howard University, what we have been able to do is basically teach thousands of students a year in our intro courses, you know, and just to solidify, to use that as the grounding to just continue to build up our department and to build up our institutional power, and then to use that as leverage to do virtually what we want to do. And so even if the university has aims of what they want to do to us, they can only go so far, because we're backed by something more powerful than them, and that's our students. You know, we're backed by our students and our community, and we're Black Studies. And so we've always understood that wherever we've been. And if faculty members, that means that when you're a chair, the most important thing that you must do is to be an advocate for your department. You have to know enough intellectually, and you have to know enough politically in order to advocate at all times for the promotion of the interests of your students and your department. That's your role as a chair. And if you're not able to do that, you're not going to be successful. And that's what I keep in mind when I'm in every institutional space. You master the environment, you know what you know, and then you try to link with students, you try to link with the community, and you build from there.
So I think I just wanted to add very quickly, because everybody else has spoken so eloquently, and I would just say that in those spaces where there is not a Black Studies department or program, the faculty and their faculty training is also critical. And so when I was the chair of humanities at Payne College, Andre Key was in history, Anthony Neal was in philosophy and religion. They actually both taught religion courses, and I was in English. And so students, many of our students, they met us in the gen ed, they majored with us, and then they went on to graduate programs in Black Studies and doing things that were connected to those communities. And so, so I just wanted to say that that it is certainly something that students are seeking, even when they don't realize they're seeking it. When they get in front of professors who are passionate about the information, that are knowledgeable, that are really grounded in Black studies, when they get in front of those people, then it actually becomes something that I think transcends whatever the curricular design of that institution is. And so while it feels, I feel really honored to be at Claflin, where we have majors and minors, and we have definitely lots of students who are now seeking us out instead of the reverse. I think that we also did some really good work at Payne College, and I'm hearing from those students all the time the things that they're doing, and so I think that it is really important to make sure that we're maintaining these linkages amongst ourselves, not just those of us who are in programs and departments, but our colleagues that were in our cohorts and coming out of the programs that we came out of.
All right, so I wanted to circle back to one of the issues that Dr. Johnson brought up, and that, and I guess I will link that to talking about the intro class, because that is, and you all have raised that, most of you have raised that in one way or another. But if you could go back and talk about that faculty study group, I think that's important, because you were basically saying that that's how you kind of constructed some of your courses, and especially talking about that intro course. And I think Mario had mentioned something too about meeting over, or somebody meeting over
reader. Yeah, we had a
that
reader,
development.
yeah,
So I want to know if you all can talk about that, because the intro course really lays the foundation for the department. Like that's the entryway, but in a lot of places it's a gen ed course. So sometimes it gets sidetracked, but it really needs to be that core founding place, that core founding course that draws students in, but it also introduces them to all of the real concepts that they need in Black studies. So Dr. Johnson, if you could kind of start off talking about that focus study group, and then what is entailed in that intro course.
So what we definitely knew we wanted to do was to not only make sure that we're teaching foundational concepts. We were not really concerned more about theory yet, because it was also tied to the general curriculum. But we wanted them to really understand the basics and the history of Black studies. So we start with the formation of the discipline, the history, and who are the players and why that's so significant. And then we move forward more towards sort of geographical location. We talk about Africa and the origins of civilization. So having this real historical grounding and putting that also in a modern context. So instead of going, chronologically through everything, we said, well, how does this history relate to circumstances today? So it made it relevant. So students were like, why do we talk about the old times or colonial? Well, this is why we're talking about it, because we see the resonances in contemporary times, in contemporary art, literature, social media, culture. So what we tried to do was say how Africana studies is relevant in every aspect of our lives. So we cannot sideline it. So we made sure that we were not only starting with this historical foundation of the discipline, the historical foundations of civilization, we then move forward looking at, the Caribbean, looking at diasporan cultures, but also paying attention to the connection. So we focus a lot on, Pan-Africanist thought and Pan-Africanist lenses, because we wanted to make sure that we weren't thinking about this discipline in isolation in terms of only Africa, only Caribbean, only US. So we wanted to make sure that we covered a range of topics, but also showing the connection. So it wouldn't just be a hodgepodge class either, right? When we got together about the readings, we of course chose, I actually put together a list of some of the major scholars that we do read in Africana Studies. And I wanted to make sure that in intro, they would know about Carter G. Woodson, looking at, other scholars that were, promoting an Africana Studies consciousness way before Africana Studies as a discipline came into being. So I had them read a lot of the foundational texts that I thought were important, the ones that I learned about going through the master's program in African-American Studies at Temple. And then what are some of the contemporary scholars in African-American Studies also talking about? So what we did is we looked at them in the context of what concepts do we really want students to understand. First of all, they have to know African agency. What does that mean? What does it look like? How do we represent that? In the readings and also in our practice, in our research as professors as well, but also how they should start thinking about that. We also looked at ideas of colonialism, neocolonialism, post-colonial. What are the nuances in those terms, right? What do we mean by diaspora? And why is that significant when we're thinking about diasporan studies or a diasporan outlook? We talked about worldview and the pushback against the different, schools of Afrocentric thought and the problems that people have with Afrocentricity as a term, or what is the difference between that and being African-centered if we do see a nuance between those two concepts. So we wanted to make sure that they have a real solid grounding in not only the history, but also the debates around Africana Studies. And then how can we incorporate text, not just within that intro course, but later on in other topics courses, so that information wouldn't just stay in intro. How can we build on the text that we are teaching in intro throughout their journeys throughout the major or the minor? And so that was really critical. We also got the input of professors who were not trained in Africana Studies, who were historians. Well, what are you teaching? How are you teaching about, Angola, or how are you teaching about Tanzania? And really giving us a chance to read some of those texts as well to see, is this really, what we would say an Africana Studies scholar would promote? What is this person's perspective? What is their epistemology, right? And so we had a lot of tough conversations. Everybody wasn't agreeable, because it was forcing them to rethink how they were teaching and what scholars they were also privileging in talking about Africana peoples, cultures, and perspectives. So for me, having that study group and also returning to have more study groups later was to do these sort of check-ins to see what is new in the discipline, and also what ideas have our students given us? Like, what do they want to learn more about? And then what kind of resources or scholars from other universities or institutions can we bring in to have those conversations that we are not versed in? So we know our limitations, but we try to figure out ways in which we can incorporate those in. So the study groups have been really influential and important for us to make sure that we are current with our scholarship as well, and what students have access to. So the intro, yes, it's a gateway course. It teaches the foundations, but also it really does provide for us the beginning of a scaffolding process throughout our majors.
Let me ask you something. How do you do that faculty study group? How often do you do it? And when do you do it? How do you fund it? All of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we've been in existence since 2009. So we're working on year 13. So we've had 3 summer study groups. So we do this after the academic year is over to give us, time to really focus. we usually put together an agenda, like what are we actually looking for this time? So if it's like, let's revisit the approaches, the theory methods course, that's all we focus on. We then compile all the syllabi where people have taught it before and look at what we need to think about, what worked, what didn't work, how can we, put in more current research around this particular topic. So the college actually pays for it. So what they do is they give any department a certain amount of money according to participants. So they would say, we'll give you $200 a day. That doesn't mean that we have to meet for the entire day. Usually we meet for 4 hours for an entire week because we have the reading to do. We also have, the discussion to do. So we give ourselves time before the study groups and then the week of the study groups. And then usually we come out with a model, or we say, okay, well, I think this is sufficient. We don't have to do a lot of changing. Maybe we can tweak this a little bit. So it's not to say, oh, we don't know what we're doing. It's about always giving ourselves a check-in about our curriculum. Do we need to make some shifts at all? And I think that's always important to reflect on it instead of saying that this is good as it is when we developed this back in 2005 or 2007 or whatever. So those are important for us.
It is so interesting hearing you say that, Dr. Johnson. At first, I was like, there's no way I would want to start a department. Now I'm like, oh my God, it's so much easier. Because part of what I inherited, again, a high turnover of faculty, high turnover of chairs. And then when the chairs are not chairs anymore, they're faculty. So there's that. The intro course was made a gen ed course. And so that meant that that's the Black Studies course that most people are going to take. And when I became chair, I think there were 14 sections of Black Studies of intro being taught, and then another course, Black American Culture. Those two are the main, and those are 1,000, 2,000 level courses, main courses being taught. And because the university kept wanting to turn the department into a program and make it a hybrid. So all of that kept going. So in the last 5 years, we have been kind of working on it. Well, I'm going to say really for the last 2 years, been working on not standardizing the intro courses, as you said, Dr. Johnson, making sure that we have key components. Okay, everybody who takes intro should understand these things right here. They should come away from the beginning with this. And one of the things I say, I have taught public speaking for 20 years in the School of Communication. Everybody who goes to UNO, graduates from UNO, you must take public speaking or test out of it. The public speaking, the communication department, what they have is a speech center. They have really standardized public speaking so that you have a syllabus when you come in to teach the course. If you never taught public speaking, no problem. Here's the book, here's the syllabus. You have meetings regularly. The problem for us at UNO is, again, you have faculty who used to be chairs, and you have faculty who had been there for a minute, even as adjuncts. And it was simply, no, I'm not doing that. No, you can't tell me what to do. No, I don't, some faculty, no, I don't even want my students to buy a book. So those are the kinds of things that are challenging and dealing, and we're celebrating 50 years. There's a lot of, work to be done there, but that is the absolute most important thing. And this is doable. That is the most important course. There are so many students who take intro, and from that they say, hey, I want to major. But very often it depends on the instructor they have. So if they take intro from this instructor, oh, they were great. This instructor, and it shouldn't be like that. Absolutely shouldn't be like that. So the intro course must be made more standard, not necessarily just standardized like the public speaking course, but made more standard so that we can ensure that everybody who takes our intro course at UNO comes away with what we collectively. So I'm getting a lot of great ideas. That's my point.
Once again, for me, there's the curriculum, and then there's how you deliver the curriculum. And both of those things are important. Sometimes you can have the best curriculum, but you don't have the people to deliver it. Because, despite training, they just don't get it. And, you know, what we did at Morris Brown was to have conversations. Like when we created our text, we dealt with Tapestry Press in its place out in Boston, Massachusetts. And we just looked at our collective interests in the discipline, and then we just selected readings that spoke to, in terms of Africa and the diaspora, what we wanted our students to know when they got out of this class. And those were serious discussions that went on for a summer, actually. And then when we felt like we got it right, then we published it. And then we had discussions on how you teach it. And quite frankly, at Morris Brown, we had the best teachers, you know, to deliver that curriculum. And it's the same thing when I, you know, at Howard University, for the most part, is that we have 5 PhDs in African American studies. And so that's a unique feature of our department. And for me, the most important thing that you could give students in an introduction to African American studies is an alternative way of viewing reality. And so what we attempt to do, you know, and now, and we've developed this, and, you know, Greg has developed this, Greg Carr has developed this, and we are in alignment with it. And, you know, Greg is basically teaching this to the world now online. But these conceptual categories that came out of really writing a whole curriculum for the Philadelphia public school system in terms of their mandatory African American history course, things that had been, you know, it had been working out in the classroom before that, applying it into a high school setting, and then making it even more powerful in a university setting. So when I say these conceptual categories, you know what you hear Greg Carr talking about in Class with Carr, for those who aren't familiar with it, is, you know, concepts like social structure, governance, you know, ways of knowing, science and technology, movement and memory, cultural meaning making. Like, we fit the study of all phenomena in terms of Africana thought and practice, and we allow students to make connections within and without, like across geographical boundaries, using this lens. And when they use this lens, it absolutely changes the way that they view information. So it's not just about, as Andre was saying, you know, it can't be a history course. You know, it can't be that. It has to be shifting the way our students make sense of reality. And Africana Studies is the only space that this can actually even occur, you know, quite frankly, in the academy. Because what we attempt to do is, of course, we understand that all disciplinary boundaries have their own sense of artificiality. But Africana Studies is the place where we don't even respect those disciplinary boundaries. Like, we explode them, and we can give students a comprehensive view of how it all fits together in the examination of Africana thought, life, and history. This is the space that does that. And so what I'm doing and what we're attempting to do in our classes is to center African humanity, not based on race, although race is important. But when I say that, that means that you're not framing African people by a litmus test of whiteness. The center is our own humanity, and then race just becomes a problematic that is dealt with inside our own humanity. You know, some people mistake Black studies and race. as if they're equal. No, our humanity is more important than that idea, you know? And so what we're trying to do is to view ourselves as African people in time and space. And if you are able to get the right people to deliver that view in an introduction to African American studies course, guaranteed your majors are going to increase, guaranteed, you know? And so that's the uniqueness of what we attempt to do in our intro courses.
Well, for myself and Dr. Adams, actually our intro courses were only recently added to our Gen Ed. We had these introductory courses, again, African American heritage and cultures of the African diaspora, and almost gateways to the intro courses where we don't deal with a lot of theory, but more, you know, just cultural competence and understanding, you know, these ways of being. And when they get to intro to African American studies, I spend at least the first month just explaining, okay, you have a major is based on a discipline. Explain what a discipline is, because, you know, they're just like, oh, well, this leads to a job. You know, criminal justice leads to law school or something like that, and exploding all those, like Dr. Beatty, those myths around the disciplines, and explaining, you know, how this knowledge was created in the, you know, the 19th century, early 20th century, and how you're sitting here right now, you know, replicating these majors to go off into these areas. And, you know, even though you're at HBCU, you know, when you go over to sociology, how many Black people are you reading? When you go to psychology, how many Black people are you reading? And they're like, well, I don't know. And, you know, and introducing them to, you know, these foundational writings and thinkers, and them taking that back to their, you know, because very few of them start off as African American studies majors or minors, and they go back and see the difference, and they begin migrating back. So it begins with one class, and, well, maybe I'll minor, or, you know, then the double major. And, you know, so, you know, that's really been the way that myself and Dr. Adams has been approaching it for the past several years. You know, really just laying out how are we different, and how what we're teaching you gives you a leg up in many different ways versus, you know, the traditional Eurocentric curriculum.
So you have to know more.
Yeah.
When students come to us, they have to know more. You know?
Yeah, I mean, it's to the point they're checking other professors.
It's less rigorous, but it's more. It's
right.
more rigorous.
Yeah, they're checking art professors like, what do you mean? So, yeah.
All right. Did you want to add something, Kathy?
I just wanted to say that you know, the African American heritage and the cultures of the African diaspora. I mean, I think those courses in and of themselves are so powerful in the ways in which we touch so many different majors, even if they don't come back to major or minor, and that there are just growing experiences of students that are in STEM or somewhere, you know, that come back and say, you know, what you all taught in that 100 level course has me thinking differently about some of the things that they didn't learn inside their disciplinary homes. And so that course, Cultures of the African Diaspora and the African American Heritage course are now being taught to incarcerated people in our Pathways program. And it's just a different level of transformation. People who are incarcerated and have time to read. And so I find myself, instead of saying, you know, look at these chapters, I just give them the book, and they come back and they have gone through, you know, beyond what I would have assigned. and not only connecting it to their individual identities, but their families, and then also some people who some of the students who are incarcerated and white students who are like, I thought I knew Black culture. It didn't occur to me what I didn't know about Black people, and why is this not taught in schools? And then some of them that have biracial children, right? That didn't know what they really needed to be sharing, with their children. And so I think that course, I think those two courses together are so very powerful, and not only indicate what what our majors need to know, but really just what all the students on the campus and beyond, just to kind of whet their appetite. And I often tell them when we're going through a module, and if you want to do a deeper dive on African civilizations, Dr. Key teaches the whole class on this, And so I think that those those courses are really starting to kind of do the work of recruiting in some significant ways. And I think that but you can have that curriculum, but if you don't have the right energy coming from the professors that are teaching it, then the right curriculum won't help, as Mario said.
And Dr. Adams, to your point, the students want it. The students always want Black studies. Again, students in Omaha went to jail so that there could be Black studies courses. It is the grown-ups that have a problem with it. It's the administration that have the power, that have the money, that hold the power. They are the ones that have a problem with it, and the political machine that may have a problem with it. The students want it. The faculty, for the most part, I think want it, and certainly the community wants it. It's just we have to really fight with administration to make sure that Black studies doesn't get cut. Faculty don't get cut. They don't turn it into a program, and that is an ongoing fight. But again, to your point, students want it.
All right, so I knew this was gonna happen. We still have so many issues and not enough time. So I'm gonna ask one final question, and we have two in the Q&A. So I wanted to get back to that issue of student engagement. So most of us were together at or went through Temple Graduate School. And I always tell people that if you got graduate students, they are the life of your program, because they're gonna put together the programs, they're gonna host the conferences, they're gonna do the work. But when you don't have graduate students, then you have to kind of mobilize the undergraduate students. So those of you who are doing research with your undergraduate students, you got this undergraduate students, you have them organized, you have them doing marketing for you. So I want to know if you could talk about some of those issues, because we talked about that when we had our meeting. Basically, you all have turned your undergraduates into your best marketing and recruitment tool. So how can you explain, what you do with your undergraduate students?
I'm going to jump in because I'll be brief. And then we had some earlier conversations, and they are real gems. But I think I wanted to say that one of the things that we did during COVID that I think was really important was there were a number of summer research opportunities that were shutting down because they didn't know how really to pivot, or if they were going to pivot during the summer of 2020. And Andre and I got together, and I was like, let's just do a design your own research summer program. And so we had some students, with minimal guidance, but it was like, pick a topic. I helped them select some texts to read, and then had them work on an annotated bibliography. And it really, it was able to kind of transform into two of those students getting the Mellon Mays Fellowship, which is going to provide for them, all the way through to the PhD. But it's because that summer, some of their opportunities just fell flat, didn't happen, it canceled them. And so, so I think that being very creative in doing some of those things really helped. And then also trying to tap into the things that the students were already interested in. And so we have one student for whom the issues around Breonna Taylor, just really resonated with her. She wanted to do some things around it. And she wanted to organize a panel, which became very easy to do because of Zoom. And so we invited a local activist, Vivian Anderson, to come on with us and talk about what is justice. And then that same student parlayed that into a student kind of journalism outlet that has a website component. And we were just talking today about, I said to her, thank you for trusting me when we were discussing the what she wanted to do. And I was like, this is like Ida B. Wells. You could do something like, her red record, but it's Claflin and our colors are orange and maroon. So it could be like the maroon record. And so now, we're finding out that the maroon record and the journalism club that she put together as an Africana Studies major has now been, the student, it was nominated as like one of the top clubs on campus this year. And so, again, there are going to be all these people that are looking like, oh yeah, maroon record. And then, we have two Africana Studies majors in it and a minor in it. The new president is one of our minors. And so it is, it's really kind of listening. I think it'll be much more robust when we are all back face to face in what will be what's supposed to be after COVID. I will not say going back because that's not what I hope for, but I think it's being flexible and really listening to the things that the students are passionate about, and then tapping into resources that we have from the community that can actually translate into that kind of experiential learning that Lynn talked about earlier.
Okay, but wait, so you need to back up because you started talking about our students didn't have their summer internships or their fellowships. How did you prepare your students for that? You jumped up here. Oh. We need to start down here.
Well, I mean, I think it helped that when I was a graduate student, to your earlier point, when I was a graduate student, I was a coordinator for a STEM program, for a summer research program at UMass Amherst. And so I was thinking, I know how a summer research program operates. And what we did was we used Teams so that the students would check in. They did video check-ins after they read a book. And then they put together their annotated bibliographies. And they had to do a weekly check-in. And those weekly check-ins, we just continued them on through after the summer was over. And so I think that some of that experience from being a graduate student doing that work, it was kind of already in my toolkit to say, there's some students that need that downtime, and we will allow for that. But for the students that want to do something over the summer to just kind of keep themselves intellectually stimulated. And actually one of those students was someone who rushed out to the protest and came back and said, I went to the protest in downtown Columbia and they didn't really give me what I was looking for. And I said, well, what were you looking for? She was like, what's our agenda? How are we supposed to move forward? And I said, you should look at how many Black agendas we've had. and so so that's what she's doing. She is looking at racial capitalism. She's looking at like iterations of Black agendas. And we're hoping, I'm hoping with the senior seminar that she will actually start to ground that project into South Carolina and Reconstruction, and how that kind of the politics when Black people were in charge in South Carolina, that will give her a different understanding of not just this, we haven't quite made it, but we made some advances, and then there was the backlash, and having her have a better understanding. But I think it's the graduate student experience, and some of it is being, dropped into the deep end. When you are thinking I'm an assistant professor and, I just want to keep my head down, and they never really let you do that. But it's just a beautiful thing to see her research, to actually see the research that those students worked on. We have 4 students that participated. 2 of them are now Mellon Fellows, and just kind of even maintaining that engagement during the summer, during a global pandemic.
So you're saying that they're doing their research is not tied to a class.
No.
They're doing research beyond.
Yeah.
And you're training them, and you're giving them, or they're coming to you saying, I want to do more. And you're kind of directing them towards, this is what you need to read, this is what you need to be doing.
And they're connecting with all of their other classes. And so sometimes Andre and I, we were texting each other back and forth. They had a Mellon Fellow conference, and there was a presenter, and this was what Andre, this is one of the things he was referencing. There was a mentor-mentee relationship. They had published this book on MLK, and our student was the one that was making connections from a philosophy class, and she's asking them, like, so I'm wondering, what do you think King would have said about the conversations that he might have had with so-and-so, because they were both in Atlanta, and they were just like, oh, we hadn't given any thought to that. I may take this book off the shelf tonight and take a look, right? So it's giving them a foundation, and then they take it places, and I think that is just been amazing as a faculty member to watch. I can't take credit for where her project is now, but I know every time I see her presented, the last time was at ASCAC, and just the way in which she can field questions about her own project is it's amazing, because I saw when she came back from the State House, like disappointed and jilted, right?
Can I add very quickly to Catherine's comment? Because one thing that adds to it is we don't treat our students as consumers or customers. All the neoliberal language for students, like we stress, you are an apprentice. And the point is for you to develop some mastery in these next 3 to 4 years. And that has added to what Catherine just described.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And that's what I do in the classroom too. Like, I am extremely student-centered. So my goal in the classroom is to try to do my very best in a personal way to elevate students, especially our majors. And when students feel that you love them, they are going to do that extra work, and it's not even for you, they're going to do it for themselves, But you have to, as a professor, for me, it's always important for me to make an intimate emotional connection with my students. They have to feel every day my passion. They have to feel every day that everything that I'm doing in this classroom is not to collect a check, but it's to lift you up. I'm investing in you, and you should be invested in yourself. And when students feel that in a classroom, you can take them anywhere that you want them to go. And lots of professors don't understand that basic lesson. You have to touch the spirits of the people that you're in front of. They have to feel that you're there as a human being, not as a professor, but as a human being that is in a learning environment, a co-learning environment, by the way. And you're both trying to lift each other up, because I learn from my students all the time. They don't realize it, but I do. I learn lots of things from my students in terms of how they process information, in terms of their probing questions. And I'm like, man, I look at my discussion posts all the time in Blackboard. I'm like, these could be dissertations. Like, these are seeds of dissertations right here. I've never seen, I get that all the time in my classes, but that's the beauty of teaching. Like, we have to be comfortable with not knowing, but we also have to be comfortable in the passionate, systematic search for truth. And we have to inculcate that spirit in our students, the spirit to research, to find things, to want to find things. And that has to come across in a classroom setting. And at Howard University, our students are doing everything. So I won't even, they're in Mellon, they're in all of these things all the time. They have all the fellowships. Our majors are in all of these things. They're in lots of graduate programs in Africana studies and everywhere else. But they also have their own formation attached to the department in terms of the Kwame Ture Society. And it's an intergenerational, like, it's very beautiful. It's really an intergenerational kind of configuration of alumni, of students that just care for each other over an extended period of time and continue to share, because it's an additional seed that's being planted of intellectual growth and development. And they take that seriously. So it's like, it's not just what's happening in the classroom that's important. It's what's happening outside of the classroom and what students do with each other to build each other up also. That's an important feature of what we do and what we should be doing in these formations. So, I mean, it all kind of fits together. It's all magical, but I think at the heart of it is that in Africana studies, we attempt to present a holistic picture and practice of what it means for me to be African. Like, for me, it's just not rhetoric. It is actually how we inhabit our relationships with one another, with our students, with other faculty, etc. Every day I go in the classroom, my interest is on how am I going to deliver this content in a way, in coordination with my students, to elevate them, to get them to see something different. It's not just about facts and information. It's really about a paradigm shift of how you approach knowledge and knowledge construction through an Africana lens, because at the end of the day, it's Africana studies it's a branch of human knowledge, but it centers Africana thought and practice as the nexus and the node of which all life is examined through that lens. And, for me, to see students go on and do great things in all walks of life, that's the greatest gift for me as a teacher, to have students constantly come back to me with their testimonies on what they got from this space to help them along the way. That's the greatest testimony that I can have as a professor. And I get that all the time. And quite frankly, that's why I teach. It's the sheer joy of why I teach, because I love developing students. And if we had more Africana Studies professors that actually believed and acted that way, our field would be in a different place.
Before you start, Lynn, I just wanted to piggyback off of something that Mario just said, because I got to interact with the Kwame Ture Society during the pandemic, and it was just mind blowing, and I started out with the alumni who, some of them had been out, I don't know, like maybe 10 years, and they were getting together, reading works, like every week, and having these discussions and study groups. And then the new students came in. So you had freshmen starting and having to start online because we were during the pandemic. So you got teenage freshmen and alumni coming together, and they're like, we're reading these books and we're having these discussions. And we did it all year. And those young brothers, some of them, Jamir presented at ASCAC last.
Yeah.
One of the, they're talking about, we got together, we're reading CLR James, like, okay, you just your sophomore year, but they're doing this outside of class.
Absolutely.
This is not their classwork. They're like, we are getting together, reading these serious works and having discussions. And, so it was like, they came in and they were like, wow, we love this space. We want to create. And so you got the Kwame Ture Society, but then there was another study group that got started. So you've got these young people coming in, seeing this, and they're like, oh yeah, we need to do this. Oh yeah, I'm down for reading, Gerald Horn, because that's what I was like. I was like, next summer, can we read Gerald Horn? That's what I want to do. But I mean, it's phenomenal.
Yep.
To be able to do that with undergraduates with that drive.
Yep.
So yeah.
And once you plant that seed, that's all you need.
I will always say Africana Studies students are the best. They are critical thinkers. When they invest in the discipline and the department, all kinds of things change, right? And I was thinking about my intention as the director of Africana Studies and my drive to cultivate student investment, not only in the discipline, but also in the unity of the department. And the ways in which I wanted to see that manifest was through a couple of different ways. Of course, going in and doing my best with every single lesson and class that I taught, but also wanting to, again, like you all are saying, having them understand I'm looking at their basic humanness as well, but also putting myself in vulnerable positions as well and sharing information that could also help them. So I look at it not just in exchanging knowledge, academic knowledge, but also our human experiences. And in this way, 3 years ago now, I decided, coming off of sabbatical, I wanted to start a lunch series with my students where we would not have an agenda, and we called it Thursday Cafe, where we would just get together and say, how you doing? How did your morning classes go? If you didn't have a good time, let us have a good moment together. So when you go through your afternoon classes, you'll feel a little bit better, right? So we've been doing that even during the pandemic, since we were virtual, for a whole year. We turned that into Virtual Vibes Cafe. We were doing it virtually because that really exacerbated this sort of need to still feel connected somehow, right? So, we have this, family feel about the department that makes these students feel safe with us, and to talk to us about not only academics, their goals in academics, but also some of their personal issues. That's where the mentoring also, takes on a different level. But this is what we want to do. And this is another reason why I chose a liberal arts college, because there are very few of us there. And so we need to be there for our students in those environments as well. But I was also thinking about what you all were saying about what your students are doing academically. And I think this is, again, where I go to say that Africana Studies students are amazing. Thinking about the approaches methods class that we teach at Dickinson, a lot of our students, call that the boot camp of the of the major, because they're learning so many theoretical approaches. But I remember the class of 2019. They took the information learned from that approaches class, which involved a lot of archival research. So they're going into the Dickinson archives and really trying to understand the formation of Africana Studies at Dickinson. That is one of the assignments that I give every student going through that class, because you have to know not just the origin of the discipline nationally, but the origin of your home department here. So unbeknownst to me, students took their parts of their project, put it in a proposal to the college to formulate a special interest house, which they called the X House. And it paid homage to the Congress of African Students in the 1960s, who had their own special interest house. That history was obliterated. It was only found in the archives, and they resurrected that history and said, we want to do that. We want to bring that back onto this campus. And this is what they did. So I find out just through another conversation, like, Professor, guess what we did? And it was just like amazing, like, you did this and you did it independently once again. And it was just so gratifying to see that, we might think it's an assignment that's still important, but they take it to a different level. Yeah. And then when you hear that they're having conversations about class with their friends who are not even majors, and then it gets them excited about what we've talked about, that's gratifying to me too, because again, we can put ourselves at the center if we want, but it really isn't us. It's about the way that they start to process it. So I've found that students have really been really interested in research. They really do see themselves as scholars. They've been my research assistants with my book projects or articles that I've done. Their senior thesis, they have to present at the end of the semester, giving the results to the whole college-wide community. So it's not just keeping that knowledge to ourselves or within the classroom, but they share it with the community. They not only share it as a part of their symposium, their senior symposium, but we've also had students present at Africana Studies conferences, literary conferences. We take them sometimes with us to conferences to say, this is what it looks like. This is what you're doing already, right? And if you want to be a professor, this is what you will also be participating in. So we look at it in terms of modeling as well, but also reinforcing that they already are learning the essential skills. But it's not just for other academics, like so many people write for each other, scholars write for each other. We said, no, we want to make our research legible to anybody, because it has to promote the community, right? And it has to promote a liberatory politics, and not just for yourself and not just for a grade. And they really do respect that. They invest in that. So I look at, the ways in which our departments should, as we all are saying, should invest in our students, but also allowing the students to have moments to invest in the department and in the discipline.
Wow. All right. So let me go to the questions that are in the Q&A, because we're going past time, but let's clear this, and then we'll get ready to start wrapping up. So Nicole Young is one of our, hi Nicole, she is one of our participants who comes regularly to our webinars. So we've never met face to face, but she has been coming regularly, and we appreciate that. So she has a couple of questions. So what steps would you recommend for someone to start a Black Studies department in their school or something similar in their community? I think that community part is really, really vital.
Definitely do your research. You want to make sure that you know the climate, as you know, many of us have said now as well. And if you're looking at an institution, know the institutional history, ask a lot of questions, go to the archives, like, you know, that's what I started out, you know, doing, just to kind of get a feel of things and what have been the conversations, what can I add to the conversations, thinking about what do you want your program to look like? What will you accentuate? What would be your mission? Is it going to be the same as many others, or what nuances will you put towards your mission statement? Thinking about the resources that are available as well as the resources that you will need. So what about the faculty that you have? If you're going to be in an academic on an academic campus, and what faculty would you need to hire, and is that doable, considering a lot of universities' budgets are being slashed, or, you know, have been sort of dwindling because of COVID. I mean, they're trying to do many things to slash budgets, you know, whether that's, some are legitimate, some are necessarily not, but knowing the resources that you will need to have a department and or a program, and even that's basic. What about your you know, secretarial staff? So it's not just about the faculty, but what about, you know, printing costs? So you have to think about those sort of budgetary matters as well, and also the kind of courses, what would constitute your core courses. If you're doing that on the community level too, thinking about the interests of the community, go out into communities. Go to community organizations who would have an investment in a program. So whether that's people who are interested in history. I moderated a panel for the Historical Society here in Carlisle, the Cumberland County. So that's the ways I've also made contacts with people outside of Dickinson as well. So I think going out into the community, being visible in the community, researching the community, you know, opportunities for those kind of connections, but also knowing your institution and how to negotiate and navigate those institutional politics.
Sure. I mean, I would just, I would add also, I agree with everything that Lynn has said there. I think also we need to have some sense of the impact that COVID is going to and is having on higher education now. We didn't really talk about that in this session tonight, but I think that that's going to be critically important going forward. Because it has disrupted higher education in very foundational ways. And I think forever, quite frankly. And actually, I think, I don't know if I'm the one to do this, but I think that we actually need a serious study done on the impact that COVID has had on Black studies in the academy. And for someone to do a serious survey and serious research on how it has impacted programs and departments across the nation, and how various entities have dealt with that, and how they are continuing to deal with that going forward. Having said that, is that it has brought into being and into view some other possibilities, you know, because when we shifted online, you know, one of the things that our chair, Greg Carr, did was he was like, okay, you know, he saw a paradigm shift happening. And what he saw was that, hey, you know, the future of higher education is going to look a lot different, because these barriers between the campus and community in terms of knowledge are going to be eviscerated and eroded in this environment. And it's going to be even more important for us to demonstrate our power in this particular moment in terms of what we can deliver to people. And so Greg saw this as an opportunity to further demonstrate what does Black studies, we've always been in the community, but what does it look like? What does Black studies look like in the community in a deep, engaged, intellectual way? And that's what he is, you know, doing now. And I'm, you know, actually kind of assisting him in this process now with Karen Hunter on a platform called K Narrative. And, you know, to Nicole's question is that this is, if you go to their website, this is gesturing toward a model of what Black studies could look like, you know, for the community, you know, online, taking into community interest and delivering high quality knowledge and courses to the community and engaging, you know, the community on a weekly basis. You know, I'm, you know, teaching Egyptian hieroglyphs, but Greg is teaching everything else. But it does provide a model of what this can be, and what you do see, and what I do see increasingly among Black studies scholars is that they have made the shift, and you do see a significant increase in terms of YouTube channels and those types of things from a variety of Black studies scholars that are now migrating a lot of their content into this kind of new medium. So it is a shift that is undercurring right underneath our feet. No one knows how that's going to fully play out, but you know, it is going to deeply impact us in very significant ways. And so when you're looking to start up programs, this is obviously going to be a factor for any administration looking to support any new programs. It will take a lot of political heavy lifting to create a Black studies program or department in this particular moment.
And to your point, Dr. Beatty, one good thing though is online. It's like, oh, so even all the webinars we have done all year, that is a really good example of what COVID taught me. Oh, okay, we can do webinars. You mean we can get these, you know, even part-time adjuncts who can teach online. So you don't have to be in Omaha. You can teach this course online. And what I learned from my own course, my research area is race. And I had never taught online, refused to teach online until COVID hit. Man, I started teaching online, and you know, this is a predominantly white institution. A lot of students will say things in discussion boards that they would never say to each other in a classroom. And so there has been a lot of possibilities that have come out of, and I totally agree with you, the future of higher education is going to be different. And Nicole, I don't know if you are in town, but if you are in town, please come in and see me. And let's
She's
talk.
not. Actually, while you're there, keep your mic on, because this is Nicole's next question. Are there any plans to make the Black Studies degree 100% attainable online? I'm a UNO student in Chicago and would love to have this as my minor. The classes that I've taken thus far have not only been enlightening, but I've been inspired to want to learn and devour all that is of the Black Studies.
Oh, thank you for that. And I will tell you that we have enough courses online for you to get your entire degree online. We have a lot of courses online that we would never have had online. And a lot of people had to learn to teach online, myself included. And then we even have an online only instructor. I mean, who knew that all of that was possible? So absolutely, we have a lot of courses online. And again, Nicole, let's you and I set up a meeting so that we can talk more.
Also, I mean, I failed to mention this. Nicole is in Chicago, but when I was at Chicago State University, this is for all of us actually. We had, this existed before I got to Chicago State University, but there was something called the Chicago Council on Black Studies that brought together, and it primarily met at Chicago State University in my department, but it brought together local programs and departments, and we met monthly to talk about issues in the departments, political issues, international issues. It was like a meeting of the minds of local scholars that were passionate about Black studies. Now, in this environment, that could just be expanded out. This is like James Stewart, the expansive model of Black studies. That doesn't have to be quote unquote Chicago centric. Like this could and should, like I'm just thinking through this now, this is something that could be expanded out where you actually bring chairs or faculty members in Black studies together regularly in forum to have conversations, and they don't even have to be viewable to the public, quite frankly, but to just have conversations about the discipline. And it actually should be coordinated within NCBS. But I mean, I think this would be a great idea, especially for future scholars coming up, because there needs to be a type of initiation process, in very sophisticated ways for scholars coming up. They need to know the terrain, they need to know the history, but they also need to know the politics too. And they can learn from chairs and faculty members, et cetera. And all of this becomes important knowledge base for the scholars that we're trying to give the baton to continue to carry on this great tradition.
Mario, Rosetta just put in the chat, can ASCAC host that initial meeting?
Nope. It's the wrong forum. It's the wrong place for it. Yeah. It has to be something else.
Okay.
It has to come from NCBS or something like that. It has to come from in Africana Studies.
All
it
right.
wouldn't get the same type of buy-in.
So for the final question, what advice would the panelists give about becoming a chair in Black Studies? How to approach upper admins, deans, et cetera, about creating equal opportunities for leadership in Black Studies?
Well, first of all, when you're chair of a Black Studies entity, start off with prayer. And then after you pray some more. But I will say that it's a heavy lift because of the inertia of white supremacy that plays out in whiteface and blackface. Okay, it doesn't matter the institutional formation. It plays out in all of the spaces. And in Black spaces, because the gaze is on so much of what white people might think, and in terms of white philanthropy, there's always this external gaze that impacts decision-making in very sophisticated ways on HBCUs. And this is why Black Studies at HBCUs isn't as elaborate as it should be. Of course, there are Black Studies course offerings throughout the curriculum, but as autonomous entities, it's nowhere near where it should be on Black college campuses. But writ large, I mean, I think that as a chair, first of all, you have to have mastery of the discipline. Like to me, that is where your cachet is at. Like when I say that, is that when you come into a room with administrators, you have to know what they know and you have to know what they don't know. Okay, you have to know both. And if you're not able to do that, then you're not able to be the best advocate for what it is your department actually needs. And you have to know the field well enough to be able to situate your department or program within a larger, deeper conversation. And then, as Lynn is saying, know the history of what that is on that campus. And you have to master the politics of your environment, of your academic environment and the external environment. You have to network, you have to make strategic, systematic community connections outside in the true kind of Black Studies tradition. But most of all, you have to be student centered. We exist for students, period. If you're not student-centered, that means in terms of advising, in terms of mentoring, in terms of the delivery of instruction, if you don't take the basics seriously in reference to your students, everything else is meaningless as a chair. And so you have to have faculty that hopefully get that, that buy into those ideas. And that makes your job a lot easier as a chair. But as a chair, you're pushing a lot of paper. As a chair, you're doing assessment, on multiple levels every year. It's a great deal of bureaucracy that you have to maneuver in this administrative position. But in addition to that, you got to know everything that's going on in your department and the politics outside in order to leverage power enough for you to sustain and maintain and to allow that space to thrive. And you have to be able to develop creative, innovative programming that is unique to your space that attracts people to it. Like in Chicago, what we did a Black Chicago program. It was like, hey, Chicago has so much history in terms of Black folk. It's like, of course, like we could run a whole year's programming just around Black Chicago. But we ran that Black Chicago program. We had all types of people, Emil Jones, all types of people coming in, to that program. It was just another way for us to highlight what we did in the department. So you have to feel your environment intellectually and politically as a chair, and then feel where to weigh in. Sometimes things aren't going to be easy. Like sometimes I had to be very forceful at Chicago State University. And I had to use the full weight of who I am in order to assert a position. You'll kind of know when and feel when you have to do those things. But for me, I have a moral compass. And that's what's driving everything for me. I have a moral center and an intellectual center. And at every point, everyone in the room knows that the only reason why I'm there is not to elevate myself, but it's to elevate this department. And when people see that, they respect you, regardless of who they are. But you got to know it in order to be in those rooms to defend it.
That is absolutely my experience. I won't say anything else beyond that because you have said it all. It's exactly what it is for me.
I just want to add quickly, as chair, yes, it's exactly what Mario said. But what I have come to understand is that you have to run the department and not let it run you. Because you have to think about yourself as a human too, and your wellness, because these institutions love you doing a lot of work because it's part of their own recruitment for the college. And they will let you have, at least my experience, they will let you have full reign if you want to do all these projects. Oh yeah, go ahead, because it looks good for the institution. But then you have to think about yourself. How much can I do? And how much support am I getting beyond the good for you, go at it, right? So you have to be able to kind of sit back and think, am I feeling good right now? Am I overworking myself? Because they will allow you to overwork, no problem. So think about also what you need as an individual, as a scholar, as a teacher, because that administrative work can be overwhelming because you're meeting a lot of deadlines and it's according to how big your department is or small your department is. You could be one of two, like I am, appointed in the department and have contributing faculty who just want to let you do all the work and not necessarily contribute anything other than courses. So you really have to think about too your own well-being as chair as well.
All right, did anybody else want to chime in? All right, if not, let me say thank you to all of you. This was a fantastic way to end our webinar series. I mean, and really this could go on for like another hour or two, but we must come to a close. But thank you, Dr. Johnson, Dr. Beatty, Dr. Adams, Dr. Key, and Dr. Robinson for giving us your time. This has been this whole series, but this particular panel has just exceeded all of my expectations. I mean, I knew that y'all were all just wonderful and fantastic. So I knew we weren't gonna have a problem, but I mean, you've given us so much information. And so I'm taking all kinds of notes, and I'm sure when this is uploaded to YouTube, people are gonna be watching this and watching it again to get, information. You might have people contacting you. I am hoping, Dr. Robinson, that this is the beginning of an annual or biannual roundtable that you do with other chairs and former chairs, because I think this is a very good forum for people to talk about, but it's also essential for people at different universities and colleges to be able to talk about what they're doing and sharing that, because somebody might be doing something really fantastic and wonderful at one university and you're thinking, oh man, I should be doing that, So sharing the ideas is key here. So thank all of you for that. So with that, we have, for those of you that happen to be in Omaha, if you're not, I'm sorry, you gotta miss out. But tomorrow we're having our very final last event called the Music of the Revolution. So it is a way for us to unwind. It's the last day of classes for the students. It's our last event for the school year. So we're just going to enjoy the music of the time that this department was founded. If people want to come in their 1970s gear with their big apple caps, their bell bottoms, their plaid, do it. Your afro wig, whatever. So we're going to have that. But for all of you that are not here, you'll be with us in spirit. We appreciate all of your support throughout the year. And we just want to thank you. Make sure that you come out on our YouTube channel. If there's any of these that you've missed, you can see them there. You can rewatch, share them with your friends, because this was just a phenomenal series. So thank all of you. And with that, I wish you all a good night.
Thank you, Deborah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Congratulations on 50 years.
Yes,
Absolutely.
congratulations.
Congratulations.